Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the George W. Norris Legislative Chamber. The afternoon session is about to reconvene. Senators, please record your presence. Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please record.
There's quorum present, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Do you have any items for the record?
I do, Madam President. Bills read this morning were presented to the governor at 11:58. That's all I have this time.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We will proceed to the first item on this afternoon's agenda. Mr. Clerk. Mr. Clerk, we'll move to final reading. Members, you should return to your seats in preparation for final reading.
Madam President, Gross Legislative Bill 4, as it concerns Legislative Bill 4, Senator Conrad, I have FA 72 and 73, both with notes that she would withdraw.
So ordered. Members, this is final reading. Please return to your seats. Mr. Clerk, the first bill is LB 4.
Gross Legislative Bill 4, introduced by Arch 14th, request the governor bill for enacting new appropriation to appropriate funds to the expenses incurred in the 108th legislature first special session 2024 declared emergency be enacted by the state per section 1 hereby appropriate H2753 from the general fund fiscal year 24-25 legislative council program 122 expenses incurred in the 100th legislature first special session 2024 section year pressure 37,600 from the 24 to the legislative council program 123 expenses incurred in the 100th legislature special session 2024 total expenditure temporary permanent temporary side preemption funds are not exceed 22,948 24-26 here between 25,000 from the fund fiscal 24 to legislative program 127 president secured 108 legislature first special 2024 total expenditure permanent temporary salaries and per diems funds appropriated in this section shall not exceed 2,245 fiscal year 24-25 section 4 since emergency exists this act takes effect when passed and approved according to law.
All provisions of law relative to procedure having been complied with, the question is, shall LB 4 pass with the emergency clause attached? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
Voting aye, Senators Aguilar, Albright, Arch, Armandares, Boston, Bostar, Bosman, Brandt, Brewer, Kavanaugh, Clements, Conrad, Day, DeBoer, Doran, Dover, Duggan, Frederickson, Hanson, Hardin, Holcroft, Hughes, Hunt, Ibaugh, Jacobson, Calif, Linehan, Lippincott, Lowe, McDonald, Meyer, Mosier, Merman, Reapy, Sanders, Vargas, Von Gillern, Walls, Wisher. Voting no, Senators Erdman, Holler, and Slama. Not voting, Senators Decay, Ballard, Blood, McKinney, Raybold, and Wayne. Decay voting yes. Senator Decay voting yes. Vote is 41 ayes, 3 nays, 5 excused, not voting, Madam President.
LB4 does pass with the emergency clause attached. Next item, Mr. Clerk.
Madam President, priority motion. Senator Lowe would move to adjourn the body. Sine die.
Speaker Arch, as the only one who can speak to this motion, you are recognized.
Members, at the beginning of this session, I think as we started the process here, I indicated that my intention was to schedule the Revenue Committee package bills and the trailing appropriation bills. It was later in the session. Senator Linehan informed me that LR2CA was part of that. She considered that part of the Revenue Committee's proposal. And for that, I personally will be voting no on this adjournment at this point. It is, I do believe we should complete the select file debate on this measure before considering any further motions. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Speaker Arch. The question for the body is, shall we adjourn, sine die? All those in favor? This will take more green votes than red votes. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. There's been a request for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Aguilar. Voting yes. Senator Albright. Voting yes. Senator Arch. Voting no. Senator Armandares. Voting no. Senator Ballard. Senator Blood. Senator Boston. Voting no. Senator Bostar. Voting no. Senator Bosselman. Voting yes. Senator Brandt. Voting no. Senator Brewer. Voting no. Senator John Kavanaugh. Not voting. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Not voting. Senator Clements. Voting yes. Senator Conrad. Not voting. Senator Day. Voting no. Senator DeBoer. Voting no. Senator Decay. Voting yes. Senator Dorn. Voting no. Senator Dover. Voting no. Senator Duggan. Not voting. Senator Erdman. Voting no. Senator Frederickson. Not voting. Senator Holleran. Voting no. Senator Hanson. Voting no. Senator Hardin. Voting no. Senator Holcroft. Voting no. Senator Hughes. Voting no. Senator Hunt. Voting no. Senator Ibaugh. Voting yes. Senator Jacobson. Voting yes. Senator Calif. Voting no. Senator Linehan. Voting no. Senator Lippincott. Voting yes. Senator Lowe. Voting yes. Senator McDonald. Voting no. Senator McKinney. Senator Meyer. Voting yes. Senator Mosier. Voting yes. Senator Merman. Voting no. Senator Raybold. Senator Reapy. Voting no. Senator Sanders. Voting yes. Senator Slama. Voting yes. Senator Vargas. Voting no. Senator Von Gillern. Voting yes. Senator Walls. Not voting. Senator Wayne. Voting no. Senator Wishart. Voting no. Vote is 14 ayes, 25 nays to adjourn, sine die, Madam President.
The motion is not successful. Mr. Clerk.
Madam President, select file LR2CA. Senator Jacobson would move to amend the bill with FA 175.
Senator Jacobson, you are welcome to open on your motion.
Thank you, Madam President. I believe we have 56 minutes until cloture. I do intend to run the full 56 minutes with the amendments that I've scheduled. I expressed it before that I oppose this LR. I oppose it because we're too close to the election to put it on the ballot this year. And furthermore, I believe there's not 40 votes here in the body to pass the LRCA. So therefore, if it doesn't reach the 40 vote threshold, it would have to reach 30 votes, and then it would be put on the ballot in 2026. We do have the 108th legislative session coming up next year for the next 2 years. And at that time, we will be talking about property tax relief, real property tax relief, and actually accomplishing more than what we got done this session by using some of the work that was done this session to set up the framework. We've had a lot of discussion about things that can be used as revenue sources. Senator Wayne brought a lot of ideas on select file and on final reading. It's unfortunate that he didn't bring those, and we had robust discussion on all of those items on general file, when that's when it generally takes place. But instead, on general file, we really did spend a lot of time just filibustering the bill. I get that. That's part of the process. I didn't like it. I was hoping that we would have had genuine debate then, but we did have enough debate on the issues, I think, when we came back on select, to understand some of the concerns that people had. I'm absolutely convinced that we'll be able to bring back many of those items that aren't controversial to the body and be able to pass those next year and provide additional funding for property tax relief. So this summer, I think this special session was productive as it relates to that piece. As it relates to the specific LRCA, my concern comes because now we're starting to pick winners and losers. Okay? This is something that what we're looking at, I've not seen any modeling on this. Okay, what we're saying is, I get it. We're going to put this on the ballot so that we can allow the voters to decide if we want to set owner-occupied residential real estate at a different rate than 100%. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is that we want the legislature to think about lowering that percentage to a lower number. So now let's go in to some of the basics of how this works and where my concerns lie. Remember that property taxes are only assessed by local political subdivisions. So because they are the ones who set their budgets, which is going to determine how many taxes are being charged to you as a property taxpayer, the way we get to that number is we take the property tax base and divide it into, and we calculate that against the property tax ask, and we come up with the mill levy. So the mill levy times the base will produce the taxes that we're trying to generate for the political subdivisions. So if you start lowering the base, which is what you would do if you lower residential values to say 85%, then you're going to lower the base. And then if you leave that where it's at, the political subdivisions are going to generate less than what they are asking for in their budget within the caps that we set in place in LB 34. So how do they make up that gap? Well, I'll tell you how they do. They shift it to the other classes of real estate. That's just a tax shift. It's done absolutely nothing to lower property taxes. Now we're picking winners and losers. We're going to shift it from one to another. I think what we need to be doing instead is talking about real property tax relief for everyone. And that's what we intend to do next session, is lower property taxes for all taxpayers, not trying to split it between the classes. So that's my fundamental reason for being opposed to this LRCA, is that very piece. I'm going to give an example. We've also talked a lot in this session about we're doing nothing for renters. Well, I beg to differ to some extent, but I would tell you that if you lower the assessed value for owner-occupied real estate, one of the losers will be those who own rental properties. I'll give you an example. My wife and her 2 brothers formed an LLC, and they purchased a duplex in Wilbur. The reason they purchased it is because my mother-in-law lives in Wilbur, moved in that duplex after her husband passed away, and after leaving the farm, moved into Wilbur, moved into a new duplex. The owner of the duplex passed away, so the children wanted to sell it. There was no place for her to live in Wilbur, so the family decided to purchase the duplex and rent her one half and rent the other half to another tenant. Now, for what it's worth, that's Senator Brandt's district. And also for what it's worth, Senator Brandt is my mother-in-law's favorite senator, okay? Now, that could change here because this LR could cause us to have to increase her rent, just so you know, Senator Brandt, and then you're out. Okay, you're out at that point, just so you know. I just want to point that out. But again, I think about how we go about setting the rent. Now, yes, we do take into consideration my mother-in-law's rent based upon the fact that raising her rent before Thanksgiving or Christmas is a bad idea. Okay, we got that. So we're careful about that piece, all right? But we did have to raise her rent. Now, I didn't. I want to make it very clear. That would be my wife and her 2 brothers. So just so you know, Mom, it wasn't me that raised the rent. It was your kids. Okay, just so we're clear. But how do we go about setting the rent? Well, here's what we did. We put up 40% of the cash and we borrowed the difference, and we did it in an LLC. How we set the rent was we figured out what's our principal payment, our interest payment, what's our real estate taxes, and what's our insurance costs, and what are our maintenance costs. And we divided that by the 2 owners, or the 2 tenants, and we set the rent, monthly rent based upon that. So that we're getting no return on our 40%, but they're paying enough rent to pay the 60% and our costs. So why are we talking about raising rent? Well, I can tell you why. Because our property taxes went up. Our property taxes went up, our insurance went up, and that combination has caused us to have to raise the rent. Now, have we raised it as much as we could? Well, I can tell you that in Wilbur, there's not many vacancies in Wilbur. In fact, we were concerned whether there was any place for my mother-in-law to live, which is the motivation for buying it to begin with. So those that say that landlords are going to just get all they can get, I'm convinced we could go back and charge another couple $100 a month and we'd get it. But we're not doing that. What we're doing is we're saying we want to be able to get our costs back, and we're willing to donate the 40% equity with no return, with that return coming from appreciation in the unit itself. Okay, so that's how it gets set. However, since she is a tenant and the neighbor is a tenant and it's owned in an LLC, it's not owner occupied. So therefore, all the owner occupied properties in the political subdivisions in Wilbur, school district and so on, they would see their valuations come down, which means the total value of the base would go down, which means for those political subdivisions to get the same amount of revenue, they would have to raise their mill levy. That would raise the mill levy on our property, which is not getting this good guy deal, and we'd have to raise the rents accordingly. That's my problem with this LR. That's why I'm not in favor of it. I think we need to look at real property tax relief for all taxpayers, not pick winners and losers. Thank you, Mr. President.
While the legislature is in session and capable of transacting business, I propose to sign and do hereby sign LB 4. Senator Wayne, you are recognized to speak. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Slama would move to amend with FA 197.
Senator Slama, you're welcome to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. I could make a joke about my dream of raising rent on my mother-in-law someday, but since she may be watching and I also need her to babysit Win this weekend, I won't say anything. But wow, I'm just not even going to unpack anything of what Jacobson referred to there. When I think about LR2CA, I'm reminded of the common saying, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think there's every good intention in the world with LR2CA. I think it's targeted towards a problem that those who support this bill would like to address with genuinely good intentions. I think there's very clearly some unintended consequences that come along with it. We'll work through those later on, but first I want to just walk everyone through the procedure and where we're at, because we are in a really weird wrinkle with vote thresholds and CAs and the elections. So just to touch on what Senator Jacobson referred to, LR2CA needs 40 votes to pass today, to pass on final reading with the special election language. If it fails to get 40 votes on final reading, but gets 30 votes, so if it gets between 30 and 39 votes, that special election language is struck. But that's where we fall into what I think is a real problematic procedural black hole in which we don't have any real clear precedent on. Because with just 30 to 39 votes, the language indicates that this issue should be on the ballot in the next general election. Not the next general election for which it's eligible, just the next general election. If we as a legislature do not happen to get this on the ballot in this current election, I have serious questions about whether or not we are unconstitutionally binding a future legislature to our passage of LR2CA, and if LR2CA could even go on the 2026 ballot. We don't have any final word. We don't have any case law that we can point to. We have some vague AG's opinions, but my take is the plain reading of the language associated with the timing of this would indicate that it's in a procedural black hole. LR2CA intends to carve out owner-occupied housing with the intention of separating that from commercial to, I would assume, eventually one day lower the valuations on that so we can provide tax relief to those taxpayers. That on its own, like as a standalone concept, I think is an all right idea, but it's the what comes next that I have real questions about. So my own rural district has a high level of owner-occupied housing. We don't have much for commercial, so you've got really just a split of residential housing, overwhelmingly owner-occupied housing, and ag. Here's the problem. You start lowering valuations on owner-occupied housing, you're going to have a revenue shortfall. Since this is just a tax shift, that's going to fall on your only other taxable land, which in my district is ag land. So again, with the best intentions in the world, I think LR2CA is giving the legislature a tool on its toolbox to shift taxes, and I'm sure we'll have a very spirited debate on this today, but at the end of the day, like, the money has to come from somewhere. I know that there's an amendment floating around that says that the state will cover the costs of any tax shifts. That procedurally is suspect as well, because I think it violates the single subject rule pretty clearly. And plus, you have no idea what that's going to end up costing in the long term. There's no way to put a fiscal note on that. I know the courts give us a very wide berth when it comes to deciding what works under single subject and what doesn't, but they are pickier when it comes to CAs. And adding the pay for amendment language that's been floated around, I think very clearly violates the single subject rule and would keep LR2CA from the ballot of whatever election it was eligible for. There's also an issue that we've pointed to during this debate, that commercial hasn't spiked in taxes paid because valuations on commercial, because unlike ag and personal property, again, this is due to demand, hasn't spiked. You don't see millionaire activist investors coming in and buying up commercial property. That's because the demand's not there. You don't see millionaires coming up and buying office space because so many companies, businesses, they're work from home. Like the demand's just not there like it is for housing, like it is for ag land. And why we've seen the spike in valuations in housing, in ag land, is market demands. And a lot of artificially inflated market demands from millionaires coming in and trying to outbid each other by acre on farmland and buying up houses that they can rent out. Another issue I see with LR2CA carving out owner-occupied residential is the concept that a lot of farms do have their farmsteads, they have their operations held under LLCs. Now, if you're a farmer who thinks that at the very least you'll be able to get your residence carved out here, if your house is owned by the LLC, I think it's a real question as to whether or not that would be considered commercial or residential. Again, like we're playing in gray areas with LR2CA where I think everybody involved has the best intentions. Like everybody wants to take on the large corporations in order to assure that the little old lady can afford her house. We all agree that's an issue. I just don't think LR2CA is the proper mechanism to address that issue. So I think I've pretty well outlined my own concerns about this and have successfully avoided joking about raising rent on my mother-in-law. I love you, Kathy. Please watch Win this weekend. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Slama. Senator Wayne, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. But first, let me be clear. If my mother-in-law or my mother needed a place to stay, I wouldn't charge them anything. Period. Second,
She holds the trump cards.
we talk about picking winners and losers. Clearly, the financial institutions have been chosen as a winner because they pay 1.84% of their corporate income. So when Senator Jacobson gets up, talks about winners and losers, going into next year, how about he stand up and pay his fair share as a corporation? See, here's the problem. Here's the problem I want to be clear about. When it comes to property taxes, businesses get to write it off. Grandma doesn't. Grandma pays it, and that's what she has to deal with. She doesn't get to write it off like a corporation. But let's be clear, if we're going to have a conversation, we're going to insult people, so let's have a real conversation about financial institutions being the winner when you're talking about picking the winners and losers, because on average, they pay about 1.84% of their corporate income. Think about the big banks that are in your community you represent not paying their fair share. So let's deal with that this special session. Senator Brandt handed out housing owner occupied. I would tell you to look at that sheet. Look carefully at that sheet. We're talking about being able to have a tool in the toolbox to give homeowners a different tax. Now, here's the deal. I have an amendment that is up there working because I have literally been working all weekend with the ag groups, sharing different ideas. And I have one that I hope Micah, who we need to take a basket and pass it around for him. We need to definitely give a basket, pass it around. He needs to be able to go out, have some dinner on us and a couple other things on us because he's worked day and night and the weekends helping us. But what this amendment will do, it's really simple, and it should be done in 10 minutes. It strikes the word "and proportionate," the words in the first section. It changes the language for Senator Brandt's section. It clearly puts three classes: owner-occupied residential, non-owner-occupied residential, and commercial. But here's the kicker of what everybody's talking about as their problem. What it says in the last section that I'm going to add, and are before January 1st, 2025. If the legislature reduces valuations of a separation of a distinct class and property for the purposes of taxation from the current valuations, that means ag, you stay where you are, businesses, you stay at 95%. That's your current valuation. Said reduction of valuation shall not result in an increased property tax burden of any other class. What that solves is this whole idea that we're going to shift it to commercial. I solved that issue in the Constitution. It's not a problem, according to the last Supreme Court ruling on what can be on a Constitution, as far as a broad interpretation. nor does it solve, nor does it run afoul to the narrow interpretation of one subject matter. We are talking about classifications of property tax. But here's what I'm going to tell people who are running for elections today. Explain to your constituents why South Point, Shields, Target is taxed at the same rate when it comes to property tax as Grandma Mary, as Grandma Bohannon, Grandma Wayne, Grandma Brandt. Why is their home taxed at the same percentage as South Point Mall here in Lincoln, Westro's Mall in
1
Omaha,
minute.
Oakview Mall in Omaha, your big commercial industries, your manufacturing industries? Why are they taxed the same? I'm not saying we have to lower the tax today, but allow the people to decide if we should have an option in this legislature. So when you get that mailer that says South Point Mall is taxed the same as your owner-occupied home, explain that. Because see, what I'm doing with this amendment is saying that if we reduce corporation, which I don't know why we would, the legislature has to pay for it because it can't have any increased tax costs. If we reduce ag below 75%, state has to pay for it. They don't have to. But you tell me a good policy reason why Grandma Bohannon, my grandmother on 33rd and Lafayette, is paying the same as Walmart.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Linehan, you're recognized.
We pick winners and losers every day here. That's what we do. We decide what we're going to appropriate money for and what we're not going to appropriate money for. We do it every day. We decide what we're going to tax and what we're not going to tax. We do it every day. I am actually embarrassed that we've come to this point and somehow we left homeowners behind. The page is passing out something right now of what first property tax credit looked like when we got here, or some of us got here in 1819. It was at 224 million. And you can see it's going up every year. And then finally we get down to 2930, the minimum amount from the prior tax year plus 1% increase over last year in all real property tax across the state is determined by the Department of Revenue. It's on a roll going uphill. Then if you turn over, you can see we do the same thing with the second property tax credit, the one that we're trying to get front-loaded. Well, we did front-load this morning. All this money was set aside for property tax cuts, which Treasurer Breezy and I worked along with Governor Ricketts and others to get property tax so we could reduce our income taxes from 7.81% for corporate, top individual 6.84%, down to 3.99 by the end of 2028. That's what we did. We've done a lot of property tax stuff. We've done a lot of tax cutting. But somehow, and I'll have to admit, maybe it's because I wasn't listening enough to the realtors, because they are the one lobbying group that came in for this. Habitat for Humanity is now also lobbying for this. We left homeowners out. I handed out earlier a sheet that's back in front. It shows what every state does when it comes to residential and ag and commercial and evaluations. There are only 2 states on here, 2, that have residential higher than ag. 2. Wyoming residential's at 12, ag's at 10. Missouri residential's at 19, ag's at 12. I can't believe this is even hard. And I understand that maybe we need to address renters, and that's what Senator Wayne's doing, and that's fine. But if we as a body, especially my class, here the whole time, all we've done on taxes, but we left out residential? When I knew this was really brought to my attention was during the hearing on LB9, when we had the state chamber come in and wave around this chart, which I won't clutter your desk with, they said, oh, Colorado and Nebraska are kind of alike when it comes to property taxes. I'm sitting there going, that's not true. Well, they're alike in this sense. Out of all the taxes collected in Colorado, 32.3% come from property taxes. In Nebraska, it's 34.2%. But guess what? As Senator Wayne handed out last week, multifamily housing in Colorado, multifamily housing is valued at 6.8% of its total value, minus $55,000. All other residential properties is 6.95%, plus you take $55,000 off. Motels, hotels, 29%. Agriculture, 26%. Commercial, 29%. So don't come in and tell the Revenue Committee we're a lot like Colorado
1 minute.
by how much total we take in property taxes and hide the ball on what actually happens in Colorado. I have, and I'm happy, I mean, pleased, whatever, that we've managed to do so much on taxes. But doing all of that and leaving homeowners at the mercy of the tax collector is not okay. I just went to Lancaster Assessor yesterday and looked up the name Smith and found a house or a piece of property that was worth around $300,000. So I found one $334,000. In 2019, this home, which sits on 3 acres with a barn, was worth $220,700. I looked at the picture. There really wasn't a picture of a house. It was just kind of a gravel driveway through some trees. I don't know how we can do this to people and not think we ought to take some action.
Time,
This
Senator.
person, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Senator Branch, you're recognized.
Question.
The question has been called. Do I see 5 hands? I do. The question is, shall debate cease? All those in favor say aye. Vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. There's been a request to put the House under call. The question is, shall the House go under call? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
18 ayes, 2 nays, place House under call.
The House is under call. Senators, please record your presence. Those unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. Senator Lowe, please return to the chamber. Senator Conrad, please check in. All unexcused senators have now returned to the chamber. The question before the body is, shall debate cease? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
27 ayes, 12 nays to cease debate.
Debate does cease. Senator Slama, you are recognized to close on Floor Amendment 179.
Thank you, Madam President. And I have a reconsider already filed, so we're going to be stuck on this one for a hot second. And I think it's really important that we take a minute to actually consider procedurally. And I know sometimes I make constitutionality arguments that it could go 50-50 either way. But here I think we're very clearly falling into a black hole where if this gets 30 votes, I mean, there's been no vote in which it's even gotten within spitting distance of 40 votes to go on this next general elections ballot, to where if we're in that space of 30 to 39 votes on final reading, we're now unconstitutionally binding the 109th legislature to put something on the ballot for the 2026 elections. Us, as the 108th legislature, I do not believe we can do that. And I think the statutory language saying next general election is very clear. Not the next general election for which it's eligible. We can just give CAs, we can just put CAs eligible for approval by the voters on the ballot for the next general election, not the next general election for which it's eligible. 2024, not 2026. However, without the LBs that were introduced this session passing, we've already missed the deadline for CAs to be put on the ballot for the 2024 cycle. So procedurally, even if you get 30 to 39 votes, I don't even think this is going to be on the 26th ballot because we do not have the authority to bind the 109th legislature to put something on the 2026 ballot. I mean, if somebody wants to argue that point with me, they can, but it's in black and white. So unless this gets 40 votes, it's not going anywhere. And we can navel gaze all day about it, but it's not going to move. And I mean, there's a genuine debate about, do we carve out owner-occupied housing from commercial? When we say it's not that difficult, it actually is. Given the special session, given the timing, given the statutory language, given the 108th legislature's authority to amend the Constitution or put proposals to voters, yes, it is actually that complicated. And to simplify it by saying that it isn't or saying that this does nothing, it's not an honest approach to what is actually happening here. If it does nothing, why are we pushing it? So I'm going to help Senator Jacobson take time, and I think I'll yield him the remainder of my closing if he would like it, just because I always know he has something to say.
Senator Jacobson, you're yielded 2 minutes, 5 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Senator Slama. Well, let's be clear that we all want to provide property tax relief. I think that's very clear. Let's also be clear that when we start talking about grandma's house and we start talking about commercial properties, we're talking apples and oranges, okay? We do a lot of work. This legislature and this revenue committee over the years has passed a number of incentives. The Imagine Act, the Advantage Act, all of these acts to provide incentives to bring corporate companies to Nebraska who will create good paying jobs, pay property taxes, pay income taxes, pay personal property taxes, and grow our state. And now what we want to do is shift more taxes to them and net out some of those incentives because we want to pretend like we're going to give a break
1 minute
to 1 to 4 family or residential owner occupied. This issue needs more discussion, needs more debate. We've got plenty of time to do it. There are not 40 votes in this body to push this to the ballot. Let's work this in the next legislative session in concert with a number of other issues that we're going to talk about in terms of being able to bring true property tax relief to all Nebraskans without taking away the incentives for corporate companies to move to Nebraska and create good paying jobs and pay more taxes and grow our economy. We're missing the boat here. We're not looking at the big picture. We're working off of emotions rather than working on reality. Shifting taxes is not the way to do it among the group.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Slama and Senator Jacobson. The question is the adoption of Floor Amendment 179. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. There's been a request for a roll call vote in reverse order. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Wishart. Not voting. Senator Wayne. Voting no. Senator Walls. Not voting. Senator Von Gillern. Voting yes. Senator Vargas. Voting no. Senator Slama. Not voting. Senator Sanders. Not voting. Senator Reapy. Voting yes. Senator Raybold. Senator Merman. Not voting. Senator Mosier. Voting yes. Senator Meyer. Voting yes. Senator McKinney. Senator McDonald. Voting no. Senator Lowe. Voting yes. Senator Lippincott. Voting yes. Senator Linehan. Voting no. Senator Kauth. Voting no. Senator Jacobson. Voting yes. Senator Ibaugh. Voting yes. Senator Hunt. Voting no. Senator Hughes. Voting no. Senator Holcroft. Voting no. Senator Hardin. Voting no. Senator Hansen. Voting no. Senator Holleran. Voting no. Senator Frederickson. Not voting. Senator Erdman. Voting no. Senator Dungan. Voting no. Senator Dover. Voting no. Senator Dorn. Voting no. Senator Decay. Voting yes. Senator DeBoer. Voting no. Senator Day. Voting no. Senator Conrad. Not voting. Senator Clements. Voting no. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting no. Senator Brewer. Voting no. Senator Brandt. Voting no. Senator Bosselman. Not voting. Senator Bostar. Voting no. Senator Boston. Not voting. Senator Blood. Senator Ballard.
We will finish the vote and then we'll deal with your issue, Senator Wayne.
Senator Armendariz. Voting no. Senator Arch. Voting no. Senator Albright. Voting no. Senator Aguilar. Voting no. Vote is 9 ayes, 27 nays, Madam President, on FA 179.
The amendment is not successful. I raise the call. Senator Wayne, please approach. Mr. Clerk, for priority motion.
Madam President, Senator Slama would move to reconsider the vote just taken on FA 179.
Senator Slama, you're welcome to open on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon again, colleagues. Again, if this is my last time on the mic and it happens to be on a filibuster, kind of fits. But I made the motion to reconsider, and I get there have been times when I've pointed to constitutional issues and people have shrugged, so I've had to go get an AG involved, and that's one of those where it's I'll go get my manager. So if you don't buy we're in a weird procedural gray area where the legislature can't actually bind the 109th legislature to put something on the 2026 ballot, don't take my word for it. Take Attorney General John Bruning's word for it. So I won't be able to get through this whole thing before cloture, but Attorney General's opinion, and I'll start from the beginning, Attorney General's opinion dated February 4th, 2010, found that, this is on page 7 of that Attorney General's opinion, and I quote, "It is our view that the language of Article 16, Section 1 implicitly means that in important or urgent situations, a 4/5 majority of the legislature may submit a constitutional amendment to the electors of Nebraska more quickly than under the usual circumstances. Therefore, since the legislature acts under a limited delegated authority when it proposes constitutional amendments, and that authority must be strictly construed, we believe that Article 11, Section 1 authorizes," and this is where I think they have a typo because it's actually Article 16, not Article 11. They just forgot the B. "Authorizes 4/5 of the members of the legislature to submit a constitutional amendment to the people at a special election before the next general election. We do not believe that it authorizes the legislature to submit such an amendment to the people in the future or after the next general election. On that basis, we conclude that LR1CA and LR5CA are beyond the constitutional authority of the legislature, and absent such authority should not be placed on the ballot for the 2010 general election." So the background with this one is, and it's not quite on point with what we're dealing with here, but I think that language of the legislature cannot put CAs on the ballot after the next general election is very helpful. This one was aiming to get the 40 vote threshold to put the special election after the next general election. Bruning outlines that the legislature's authority to date things, to vote by a 4/5 majority, to put an urgent issue on the ballot for a special election extends only to placing items on the ballot before the next general election. And this is as close as a precedent or an opinion as we can get here. But I think it translates pretty well to this occasion, in which the legislature knows it cannot get to the 4/5 majority to put it on the ballot for this general election. So we're stuck in an area where it will, if it does pass, which I don't think it has the votes for cloture, if it gets between 30 to 39 votes on final reading, the soonest it could technically come up is the 2026 election. However, we as the 108th legislature do not have the authority to bind, and some of you will be here next year as the 109th legislature. We do not have the authority as the 108th legislature to bind you to put something on the ballot for the 2026 elections. Now, I'm just going to take a little bit more time and read out this AG's opinion in full, because I could yield my time to Jacobson, but I don't know if he's going to talk about raising rent on his mother-in-law again. Oh, Senator Jacobson would like time, so I'm going to yield him the remainder of my opening.
Senator Jacobson, you're yielded 5 minutes, 40 seconds.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, I'd like, and thank you, Senator Slama, for yielding time. I really appreciate that. Well, I want to talk about a couple other issues that go along with this as we start looking at dealing with LR2CA and some of the what I think are problems that complicate this. I've heard a lot of people say that they would really like to see us charge a different rate of property taxes for out-of-state landowners. Well, the problem with that is the U.S. Constitution, which has a Commerce Clause that does not allow us to charge different rates. So if you're an out-of-state landowner of any type of real estate, you pay property taxes just like in-state landowners do. So, and they also qualify for the 1107 credits, which were in place before, but will be going away now that we passed LB 34. So if there's a way to deal with the people that have the concern there, we can do that without changing the Constitution. We have homestead exemptions that we can do today. We can provide credits to certain property taxes if we so choose. We don't need a constitutional amendment to do that. There are a number of things we can do within this body today if we choose to provide targeted property tax relief. Again, we do that today with the homestead exemption. And I would tell you that I am very much in favor and have been on board, brought a bill last year, co-sponsored Senator Day's bill last year, this last session, that would have provided property tax relief to disabled veterans. I don't believe it's right that you must be 100% disabled to get a property tax credit as a disabled veteran. There are many veterans out there that are 90% disabled. They've got to qualify through another avenue. I don't think that's right. So I would like to see some targeted property tax relief there. But what we're doing is we're opening up, if we do something here with 1 to 4 family, or we do something with owner occupied, then there are no income caps, okay? So what we're doing is we're just saying, if you happen to be owner occupied and you have a multi-million-dollar home in Lincoln or Omaha or outstate, and regardless of your income, we're going to give you a property tax break. But the disabled veterans, well, you know, you're going to have to fare for yourself. Thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for putting your life on the line. Thank you for coming back with a permanent disability for us, but we're not going to give you a break. That's a concern for me. As Senator Salama very well laid out, when you look at this process, we're not going to get this on the ballot this year, nor should we. So if we're not going to get on the ballot this year, let's work through this over the next 2 years to figure out what, if we need a constitutional amendment, and if we do, what it should look like. Senator Wayne's trying to bring an amendment, which would just allow more special interests to get their way to be able to bring more votes to this. That's not how we deal with our Constitution. We don't make constitutional changes in the 11th hour of the 11th hour of a special session. We bring it back in the light of day, and we look at those changes, and we debate those changes, and we bring reasonable changes if they make sense. But we're messing with the Constitution here. We're messing with the Constitution. This isn't just simple legislation. We're wanting to change the Constitution, and we need to think twice about that. As I continue to look at some of the things that are out there today, Senator Lowe mentioned this in some debate a while back. And this was also pointed out by John Cederberg, who does a lot of work in looking at tax policy. John Cederberg's probably the most renowned tax expert in Nebraska, and accounting expert. I like to refer to him as the accountant's accountant.
1 minute.
1 minute. All right, thank you. The accountant's accountant. And he, of course, noted that the problem that Nebraska has from a tax policy standpoint is we're about 1 million people short. Add 1 million people to our population, it works. So how do we go about growing 1 million people to this state? How do we do that? I don't think you do it by putting more roadblocks up for businesses to locate here or to expand here. I think that's not the way to look at it. People talk a lot about ag. Senator Slama appropriately hit on this. When we look at ag, right now, ag is in a position to where they're getting 75% of the evaluation. I would tell you that's still way too high in relationship to the income producing power of ag real estate. And if you look today—
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Slama, you're recognized.
All the time.
Thank you, Madam President. We're at cloture at 2:12 on this, so there's probably one person up in the queue after me, unless we get to cloture with a minute left, which I think would be a merciful end to this session. But something that's been a common thread on everything we've discussed, especially when we're trying to peer pressure others into doing what we want them to do, is like encouraging them to take the hard votes and like teasing them when they say they're hiding from taking the hard votes. And I've heard that with LR2CA a few times today, in the last few days, in the last week. And I want to debunk that one real quick. So this bill is either a really hard vote or, as proponents have alternatively argued, it does nothing. So if it does nothing, why is it really a hard vote? And that's because when you unpack what is meant to be this really hard vote, and you unpack the toolbox, and you better understand the Pandora's box that can happen if you put LR2CA on the ballot, whether it's 24 or 26. And again, I'm going to hop back into that AG's opinion, because at the end of the day, this is all going to be for naught. It's not going to get on the ballot in 26. It doesn't have the support to get on the ballot in 24. I think it's pretty clear cut that right now we're just spinning our wheels because this bill has never had 40 votes. And I will continue beating the drum on this because it is important that if we're getting up and we're discussing the policy, we're going, oh, LR2CA could shift property taxes from residential to ag, or how dare people not step up and try to solve the problems. Like, cooler heads have to prevail as you stand up here and go, no, actually, it doesn't matter what your policy disagreements are. It doesn't matter what you think about this special session. It doesn't matter if you don't think that this special session hasn't gone far enough, so we need to do something. We actually can't do this. And I'd encourage you, get out your statute books, get out your constitution, like, check my work. And if we want to have a debate on this, we absolutely can. But at the end of the day, we cannot bind the next legislature to put something on the ballot in 2026. Why I'm helping out Senator Jacobson isn't because we're buddies. We fight like 99% of the time. It is hilarious. It's like me interacting with Walter Matthau. It's fabulous. And then he talks about raising rent on his mother-in-law, and I don't even want to touch that anymore. But it's because you have to respect the integrity of the institution. This special session has violated so many tenets of what makes the legislature an independent, functioning branch of government, co-equal branch of government out of the other three. We had the call for special session come out less than 24 hours beforehand. So the list of the things that we could even cover in the special session didn't come out until a day beforehand. We were called into an unprecedented special session to cover the backside of a governor whose own proposal failed in the last legislature. So he dragged us back to a special session to say, fix taxes, and then put out a plan, and then walked back his plan, and then gave us a new plan, and then somehow in the lead up to the special session, there was less plan. The failure of this bill and anybody's perceived failure of what this special session should have looked like, what the outcome should have been, doesn't fall on anybody in this legislature. This was designed to fail and fail miserably for Nebraskans. This falls at the feet of the executive branch. A special session was never intended, thank you, Madam President, was never intended to handle an issue so broad as reform taxes. It was never intended to do that. And no matter what, as a rural senator, I was coming into this special session knowing we would need to play defense, because in a normal session, you can deal on urban senators and making sure that everybody wins in a package. We did that with 1107 with the combination of the credits and the tax relief. Urban and rural both benefited. Special session, this was never going to happen. And now we're staring down the barrel of LR2CA, which actually can't go on the ballot in 2026. But we're considering passing it anyway, just so it can, I don't know, look like we've done something. So unless this puts 40 votes on the board, and I will be the first to apologize if it does get 40 votes, this is all for naught. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Slama. Senator Erdman, you're recognized.
Question.
The question has been called. Do I see 5 hands? I do. The question is, shall debate cease? Sorry, excuse me, Senator Slama, you are welcome to close on your motion to reconsider. No.
To close. No?
Sorry, first we have to vote. So the question is, shall debate cease? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. For clarification, this is whether or not to cease debate. All those in favor of ceasing debate, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
22 ayes, 13 ayes, cease debate, Madam President.
Debate does not cease. Mr. Clerk, you have a motion on your desk?
I do, Madam President. Senator Brandt would move to invoke cloture pursuant to Rule 7, Section 10.
Senator Brandt, for what purpose do you rise?
I move cloture. Call of the House.
There's been a request to place the House under call. The question is, shall the House go under call? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
31 ayes, 8 nays to place the House under call.
The House is under call. Senators, please record your presence. Those unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. Senator Wayne, Senator Bosin, please check in. Senator Vargas. All unexcused senators are in the chamber. There's been a request for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Aguilar. Yes. Voting yes. Senator Albright. Voting no. Senator Arch. Not voting. Senator Armendariz. Voting yes. Senator Ballard. Voting yes. Senator Blood. Senator Bosin. Voting yes, Senator Bostar. Voting yes, Senator Bostelman. Voting no, Senator Brandt. Voting yes, Senator Brewer. Voting yes, Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting yes, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Senator Clements. Voting no, Senator Conrad. Voting no, Senator Day. Voting yes, Senator DeBoer. Voting yes, Senator DeKay. Voting yes, Senator Dorn. Voting yes, Senator Dover. Voting yes, Senator Dungan. Senator Erdman. Voting yes, Senator Frederickson. Not voting, Senator Holleran. Voting yes, Senator Hansen. Voting yes, Senator Hardin. Voting yes, Senator Holcroft. Voting yes, Senator Hughes. Voting yes, Senator Hunt. Voting yes, Senator Ibaugh. Voting no, Senator Jacobson. Voting no, Senator Kauth. Voting yes, Senator Linehan. Voting yes, Senator Lippincott. Voting no, Senator Lowe. Voting no, Senator McDonnell. Voting yes, Senator McKinney. Senator Meyer. Voting no, Senator Mosier. Voting no, Senator Merman. Voting no, Senator Raybold. Senator Reapy. Voting no, Senator Sanders. Voting no, Senator Slama. Voting no, Senator Vargas. Voting yes, Senator Von Gillern. Voting no, Senator Walls. Voting no, Senator Wayne. Voting yes, Senator Wishart. Voting yes. Vote is 26 ayes, 16 nays to invoke cloture, Madam President.
Cloture is not invoked. Mr. Clerk, I raise the call.
Madam President, some items. First of all, bills read this morning were presented to the governor. Additionally, agency reports electronically filed with the legislature were found on the Nebraska Legislature's website, and a report of registered lobbyists for August 19, 2024 will be found in the Journal. Priority motion, Senator Wayne would move to adjourn the body until November 18th at 10 o'clock a.m.
The question is, adjourn the body until November 18th. There's been a request for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll. Senator Wayne, was that regular or reverse order? Reverse order, Mr. Clerk.
Senator Wishart, voting no. Senator Wayne, voting yes. Senator Walls, voting no. Senator Von Gillern, voting no. Senator Vargas, voting yes. Senator Slama, voting no. Senator Sanders, voting no. Senator Repe, voting no. Senator Raybold, Senator Merman, voting no. Senator Mosier, voting no. Senator Meyer, voting no. Senator McKinney, Senator McDonald, voting yes. Senator Lowe, voting no. Senator Lippincott, voting no. Senator Linehan, voting yes. Senator Kauth, voting yes. Senator Jacobson, voting no. Senator Ibach, voting no. Senator Hunt, voting no. Senator Hughes, voting no. Senator Holcroft, voting no. Senator Hardin, voting yes. Senator Hansen, voting yes. Senator Holleran, voting yes. Senator Frederickson, voting no. Senator Erdman, voting yes. Senator Dungan, Senator Dover, voting no. Senator Dorn, voting no. Senator Decay, voting no. Senator DeBoer, voting no. Senator Day, voting no. Senator Conrad, voting no. Senator Clements, voting no. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, Senator John Kavanaugh, voting no. Senator Brewer, voting yes. Senator Brandt, voting yes. Senator Bosselman, voting yes. Senator Bostar, voting yes. Senator Bosson, voting no. Senator Blood, Senator Ballard, voting yes. Senator Armendariz, voting no. Senator Arch, voting no. Senator Albright, voting no. Senator Aguilar, voting no. It was 14 ayes, 30 nays on the motion. Senator Bosson voting yes. Vote is 15 ayes, 29 nays on the motion to adjourn, Madam President.
The motion is not successful. Senator Frederickson for a motion.
Madam President, I move that the journal for the 17th day, as prepared by the Clerk of the Legislature, be approved.
Colleagues, you've heard the motion. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
39 ayes, 1 nay on approval of the journal.
The motion is successful. Mr. Clerk.
Madam President, priority motion. Senator Dorn moved to adjourn the 108th Legislature for a special session. Sine die.
There's been a request for a roll call vote in reverse order. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Wishart, voting yes. Senator Wayne, voting no. Senator Walls, voting yes. Senator Von Gillern, voting yes. Senator Vargas, voting yes. Senator Slama, voting yes. Senator Sanders, voting yes. Senator Repe, voting no. Senator Raybold, Senator Merman, voting yes. Senator Mosier, voting yes. Senator Meyer, voting yes. Senator McKinney, Senator McDonald, voting no. Senator Lowe, voting yes. Senator Lippincott, voting yes. Senator Linehan, voting no. Senator Kauth, voting no. Senator Jacobson, voting yes. Senator Ibach, voting yes. Senator Hunt, voting yes. Senator Hughes, voting yes. Senator Holcroft, voting yes. Senator Hardin, voting no. Senator Hansen, voting no. Senator Holleran, Voting no, Senator Frederickson. Voting yes, Senator Erdman. Voting no, Senator Dungan. Senator Dover. Voting no, Senator Dorn. Voting yes, Senator DeKay. Voting yes, Senator DeBoer. Voting yes, Senator Day. Voting yes, Senator Conrad. Voting yes, Senator Clements. Voting yes, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting yes, Senator Brewer. Voting no, Senator Brandt. Voting no, Senator Bosselman. Voting yes, Senator Bostar. Voting no, Senator Bosson. Voting no, Senator Blood. Senator Ballard. Voting no, Senator Armendariz. Voting yes, Senator Arch. Voting yes, Senator Albright. Voting yes, Senator Aguilar. Voting yes. Vote is 29 ayes, 15 nays to adjourn, sine die.
The motion is successful. We are adjourned, sine die.